Laurent Berlant defines cruel optimism as encapsulating those things that we want, but which are deeply antithetical to our actual happiness and well-being. We have names for the affects created by the state of contradictions. We have critical theories that take up the environmental crisis. Eco-criticism, eco-poetry, ecological economics. All of these critical disciplines, ethical consumption paradigms, and explanatory frameworks, Vanessa Machado de Oliveira will say are modernity's last days, kicking and screaming to remain alive. Dystopian narratives, in the words of Andrew Milner, are a speculative frame one can use to consider current developments, thereby yielding intellectual resources for envisaging positive alternatives. An even more hopeful rendition of this is the concept of futures literacies, a pedagogical framework that aims to cultivate our capacity to imagine the future, in a close reading of what Horst and Gladwin call the tea leaves of our present. But in her book, Hospicing Modernity, de Oliveira offers a new, completely different orientation to our collective struggle with the legacy of modernity, an act of hospicing, a quiet acceptance of what has come to pass, a clear and grounded vision of what is, and a steady spiritual journey into the future. Welcome to Season, a letter to the future. You are a young traveler, a journalist I want to say, but the more accurate description of your task in the game is a memory worker, a witness.
From the village, these cranes look like little creatures, grazing. I had no idea how huge they are.
I first heard about this game from my dear mentor, Hildegard Westerkamp, an intellectual composer and acoustic ecologist, one of the founding members of the World Soundscape Project. This is a game where you can do field recordings, she excitedly told me. Indeed, this is not a typical game mechanic. The recording screen offers a familiar view, but instead of aiming a gun, you hold out a microphone. In Season, photography, field recording, interviewing, and collage are key mechanics that build up the narrative progression. You hail from a small village in a vague time period and familiar, yet indistinct geography. Details in the story reference South America or Mexico, yet named locations later in the game, such as Tiang Valley, allude to Asian countrysides. At the same time, in order to position the narrative outside familiar world frames, the game refers to strange place names, such as Blissful Constellation and the Watery Republics. The bricolage of geopolitical place names and fractured time periods are meant to be disorienting. It is as if the game itself desires to pull the player into a witnessing role at the edge of time and space. Often interactions in this relatively short game story feel like dream sequences. Underneath, however, is a disorientation of an impending cataclysmic event, the ending of a season, as the imperative for our hero's journey. You come from a small mountain village named Caro. People seem to live peacefully here, and no one has left in a long time. The village is a kind of sanctuary founded by a doctor of dreams. Season doesn't just tell you the whole story of the world or what has happened. It asks you to make up your own mind.
I remember seeing the ocean for the first time, and something about the light, the water, the voices of other people, the boundary between myself and the rest of the world felt very thin. It was beautiful. There's something weird going on with this bell.
Murals in Caro speak to the dangers of memory illness, as if forgetting was the remedy towards a new future. Along your journey out of Cairo, small abandoned shelters tell the stories of people running from war, destruction, and collapse.
I can see in these letters that the outside world has extremes of beauty and tragedy beyond anything I've known.
In Cruel Optimism, Berlant talks about the genre of crisis that exceptionalizes ordinary events, distorting them into, quote, something structural and ongoing, with trauma being the operational mechanic for the shattering of normalcy. Season does the opposite, really. Crisis here is so ordinary and inevitable that its effective events are in the very process of becoming historical.
Most of what I've seen from the outside world probably arrived in a cart like this.
Our protagonist's detached journalistic curiosity creates an almost sociological feel to the game activity. Futures literacies is meant to cultivate our capacity to imagine the future. However, techno-fetishistic visions of a future reconciled by agnostic AI are rightfully critiqued for employing the same colonial, anthropocenic mindset that has got us to our current state of urgency. Season doesn't offer a sandbox for reimagining techno-solutions, nor does it confront us with a dystopian nuclear winter. The futures literacy that it cultivates is one of witnessing, of archival, and of acceptance of what indigenous and Afrofuturist scholars call, quote, a world of cycles. The current season is coming to an end, and your job is to collect, observe, take photos, and sound recordings. The way you arrange these collected items in your journal is left up to you. You will tell the story as you see it and as you discover it. Your impressions will depend on how you interact with characters you meet. You are made aware that your choices in how you represent the world will have historical implications. In other words, they will shape how future generations understand the season. Your journey on a bicycle begins with a sense of wonder and curiosity, but as the weeks stretch on, it becomes lonely and somewhat ominous in its unfamiliarity. Abandoned cranes and overpasses, power lines and energy towers adorn the landscape. Your protagonist writes down, "These structures dominate the landscape but are not made for it." Subtle signs of climate change and collapse are sprinkled throughout the story, written in desperate messages on walls and underpasses. One such message, at the bottom pillar of a power line, reads, "I tried to change the season by changing the landscape. I tried cutting these things down like trees, but it didn't work." You bicycle through lush countryside, past many abandoned small settlements, remnants of a long-lost urbanized, industrialized world. But unlike the dystopian feel of most other cli-fi survival games, here the atmosphere is contemplative, safe, pleasant. Getting into your main quest, you begin to see signs for a resettlement initiative promising a new beginning in a place called Radiant City. Preppy slogans for a better tomorrow bear similarities to Cold War-era propaganda, a dominant trope in dystopian video games such as BioShock and Fallout. Here, the posters are marked with the logo and the name of an organization, Grey Hands. A friendly guard, a grey hand in paramilitary uniform, tells you the valley is being evacuated due to an unpreventable flood. An old dam is being decommissioned because no one left alive knows how to fix it. Intrigued by your mission to document the season, the guard lets you in to explore till sundown. This is your first real assignment, Tiang Valley, home of the 3 reliable gods.
Imagine if the man I met is the only living grey hand, and the rest are cardboard.
but the gray hands seem a bit too friendly. What is the deal with them? Your first journal quest is to investigate the gray hands and what they call Day Zero, the beginning of a new season in Radiant City. On your investigative journey, you find promotional literature scattered in abandoned registration and recruitment areas. There is a short manifesto available which reads like a goodbye poem to our collapsing world. Everyone knows something is wrong, but nobody knows what to do. Everyone you meet is paddling endlessly through grief. What kind of season is on the other side? No one knows. Join us. But in the trash, you find one leaflet marked with graffiti in red. Lies.
And you are Mata.
In your exploration of Tiang Valley, you meet a few of the last remaining residents packing up to go. They don't want to leave their pastoral lives in the countryside. Happy cows roam an abandoned farm. You pet them, but don't seem to question what will become of them in this flood. You read the farmer's note and turn on the radio to the classical music station for the cows. The game forces you to observe with detached curiosity and acceptance. No chance to intervene. You come up on a dig site that has been managed by the Grey Hands. This is your chance to investigate and organize materials in a way that tells the story of what is happening. As you explore, the game reminds you frequently of your job, to witness, to ask critical questions, and be the voice of the people being displaced. The subject of the dig site is a rare type of flower, a memory flower.
God of sleep, I've been gathering harpic, and I've been gathering courage. If my big prayer is wrong, if it goes against divine will, please spare the people of this valley. We're so desperate for peace.
It appears as though experiments have been attempted to extract its properties in order to be able to manipulate, erase, alter memories. Further exploration nearby lets you discover a garden, a whole garden of memory flowers. Before you enter, you were warned about the dangers of exposure, but you are equipped with an amulet from your village, which will keep you grounded in your identity. At first, the memory flowers are silent, but as soon as you direct a microphone to them and start recording, the voices of past strangers come to life. An entire memory field further along in your travels offers an overwhelming cacophony of sounds, of distress and grief, alarm and confusion. The three mysterious god statues around Tiang Valley create a curious mix between magical realism and familiar ordinary life. Timelines are intertwined and somewhat out of time, out of sync. Evidence of present-day civilization is staged as old history in this world. The urban past is being replaced by a pastoral present that itself is coming to an end. To begin, perhaps, another urban future? As I rushed to complete Tiang Valley, thinking the game offered many more sites of exploration, I realized this is actually the end. My one job upon exiting the valley was to travel to the coast and turn on a set of warning lights to warn other, more distant worlds that the season is ending. I also mistakenly thought I could go back, revisit areas and fill out my journal later on, but the game uses forced progression. Once out of the valley, you can no longer revisit previous areas. If you want to collect more material, you must delete your data and begin again. To me, this drives home the finality of archiving. You tell a subjective story, and a future reader interprets it in a subjective way. Omissions are not recoverable. They are lost, like pieces of history that were never noticed or recorded, or deemed significant enough to include. Season is a unique game, not because the mechanics are so unheard of, but it is the ineffable atmosphere in Season that creates a unique entry point into the end of the world story. There is something here of what Matthew Legat terms the melancholic sublime.
I am probably the last person that will ever be welcomed here by this sign.
The melancholic sublime, he says, involves, quote, the work of interpretation because subjectivity defines its very essence. The foreboding yet melancholic atmosphere of Season definitely feels sublime. Its mixture of urban and rural, historical and modern, with a dimensional alterity is unique and captivating. The protagonist's reflections, spoken softly as an inner monologue, create a sticky affect to this quest. Even the Grey Hands propaganda video offers aspirations to a better tomorrow, with odd, bizarre slogans. Ultimately, you are left undecided as to the intentions or likelihood of success behind the Radiant City project. Perhaps like all beginnings, it means well. In the sense, the activating of a future's imagination here is not accomplished with science fiction prototyping. Instead, there is a distinct lack of political motivations, as if they too have faded into the history of this decayed urban world.
They say they're going to build the next season. How?
This is the main lesson of Season, that the world is both incredibly meaningful and incredibly transient, that the stories we record, through artifacts, images, sounds, and impressions, are objects of responsibility and accountability. We cannot stop the end of the world. This is not a hero's quest, but a hospice visit. As Vanessa Mercado de Oliveira offers, we can neither reverse modernity nor fix its detrimental effects on the environment and community of kin. We must compassionately observe as it lays to rest, making space for the next era of history. With that, despite its brevity and lack of splashy heroics, Season is one of the most poetic works of reconciliation with our violent, collapsing present, and a hopeful look towards new start. And it's true. We need new ways to talk about the end of the world, ways that locate us in it rather than offer us escape from it, give us clarity on our roles and responsibilities in its transition.